Good afternoon, and thanks for joining the Retail Dietitians Business Alliance team. My name is Annette, and I'm the Executive Director of RDBA. And today's webcast is focused on preparing for the future, COVID's long-term impacts on grocery retail. So today we have with us, of course, Bill Lempert, who's the CEO of RDBA, but we've got a great panel of retail dietitians with us. Ellie Wilson from Price Chopper. We have Caroline Cheong from Natural Grocers, and then we have Allison Delaney from Stop and Shop, who is also this year's Retail Dietitian of the Year. Thanks, you guys, for joining us.
Yeah, congratulations, Allison.
Yeah.
Yay. Sorry.
So today's focus is really on all that's happened with COVID-19, the impacts on retail, but most importantly, how do we really prepare for the future? And what do we think are going to be the long-term impacts of this? So I'm excited to have you guys here with us today for this discussion. So Phil, I'll kick it over to you to get us started today.
Sure. So certainly when we look at the pandemic, everybody's been affected, whether it's consumers, whether it's the supply chain, whether it's CPG companies that are cutting their SKUs, whether it's social distancing, on and on and on. But you know, I think that the most important thing, and Allison, since you are the RD of the year, I'm going to start with you. So what scares me, and scare is probably the right word, is I believe that retailers who are trying very desperately to figure this out, to social distance, to have everybody wearing masks. I was talking to the CEO of a major Midwestern chain just about 3 weeks ago. And what he said to me is, he said he's really concerned about his employees having to go up to people and say, wear a mask, or social distancing, or things like that, really putting his staff in physical danger, if you would, to be very dramatic. What are the impacts that you've seen, both personally and corporately, from COVID-19 that's affected the way that you're thinking these days?
Great question. Very broad, obviously. So I think there's a couple things I'll highlight personally, and then we can flip it to the other girls or ladies or women, I should say. So I have a little bit of a unique perspective. So when COVID started, I was actually working on the private brands organization, which was a totally different area than where I am now with Nutrition Partners, obviously. But I was asked to actually lead a project right at the beginning in May or June about, okay, what are our COVID impacts going to be long term? So we can then go to the merchandising teams and say, this is what you guys should watch for long term and short term. So basically what we did is we looked at all of our sales during COVID, and we looked at what we thought were going to be kind of that panic purchasing behavior, and then also the more long-term behavior. We looked at sales impact across categories. So, hey, what are the categories that people are bored at home right now, so they're spending more money, or they're more health conscious right now, versus the long-term thinking and the long-term strategy. And there's a lot of extremely fascinating data that we're working with there. But I think the two main points that I would bring up is, one, private brands. So COVID had an extremely interesting impact in our business on private brands. So shoppers would go to the stores, whether they're shopping online or in stores, and their favorite brand wasn't in stock. And they were thus shifted to try other brands. And oftentimes private brands were the product that were on shelf. And so we saw robust sales in private brands across the board. And I think that is going to stay. And the reason why I would say I think that's going to stay is two thoughts. One is, it's more cost conscious. So I think a lot of the customers that is a long-term impact, I think, that will last, is that people were shifted to have a more cost-conscious mentality. And if you didn't know this, private brands is always going to be the cheapest product on shelf. It's equal or lower price than the national brands. And with that, major retailers, including Stop and Shop, the quality has to be equal or better. So people were forced to try private brands because their favorite brand or, their preferred brand wasn't on shelf. And they found, hey, look, I'm going to spend equal or less money, and I'm actually going to get equal or better quality than the national brand. So I'm going to shift that to my preferred brand. So we're actually seeing that across many categories, HBC, supplements, vitamins, and then obviously food as well. So that's one thing, our business priorities have kind of shifted towards promoting private brands more than we did before. And our dietitians promoting private brands to our customers. That's now like the hero products that we really push out to our customers who are budget cost conscious and also just looking for quality products. So it's kind
Allison,
of a
wait before you get to the next one.
Yeah.
Two questions. Number one, when you looked into your crystal ball, did you ever expect that flour and baker's yeast would be, in short supply?
I don't think anyone expected that at all whatsoever. The craziest things, like you said, yeast, you couldn't possibly predict that. Which actually, I think you were going to ask one other question.
Yeah. So when we look at private brands, and I agree with you that the quality is up. Certainly, we've got other retailers around the country, Aldi in particular, that has really pushed private brands to the next level. I think that every retailer is looking at Aldi saying, wow, we want that quality, we want that value. Consumers actually want that more than ever before. What the downfall was during the pandemic is a lot of the co-packers who packed Stop and Shop's brands and so on were also packing, smaller boutique companies. And basically, your suppliers said to these, to Phil's Gourmet Sauce, something, I'm going to take care of Stop and Shop. I'm not going to take care of you. So as a result, we also saw a lot of these emerging brands not being able to be on the shelves.
You read my mind. That was my point number 2, is supplier diversity. And supplier diversity, I'm not talking diversity in, that's a whole different initiative, and Black-owned company, woman-owned companies, but we used to have one supplier for rice. Now we have 3. We used to have one supplier for our main cereal. Now we have 3. And that's a different thing to think about, whether you're talking A brands, national brands, or private brands, is you need a backup supplier. You need multiple backup suppliers to keep your shelf stocked. But then when we're talking to consumers, a lot of formulations have changed in the products because we're now getting products from other vendors just to keep our shelves stocked. So from a retailer perspective, you're not going to make any money if your shelves are empty. So you can't afford out of stocks, and we can't predict what's going to happen next. Like COVID knocked all of us off of our feet. So it's preparing for uncertainty. And I think that goes back to your first question, Phil, is how we didn't know that was going to happen. That blew all of us away. You can't really prepare for what's next, but you can prepare to have backup solutions for major products. Like we cannot afford to be out of flour. No one can. We cannot afford to be out of butter, milk, whatever. So have your extra suppliers on hand. Promote your private brand products, like give that brand loyalty across the board. So when customers see that their favorite brand is out of stock, they're willing to try, another brand, and that brand loyalty with your private brands. We have like a hero private brand label called Nature's Promise that people go to Stop and Shop to get Nature's Promise. It's not your typical private brand, like generic brand. It's organic, it's free from, it's this hero brand that we're really proud to talk about and thus promote. So I know that's not the traditional answer to like long-term COVID impact, but I think private brands and supply chain and having like a safety stock are the first 2 things that come to mind from more of like a merchandising standpoint versus dietitian standpoint.
So Ellie, let me ask you a question. Price Chopper, Market 32, the family has long focused on having great relationships with local vendors. A lot of supermarkets, the ones that the 3 of you represent, were out of stock. What are you doing now to make sure, because if we look at USDA and a lot of the information that's coming out, this is not going to be our last pandemic. We're going to have situations like this in the future. How has your, local strategy worked during the pandemic, and what do you think happens next?
Well, I will say that I'm actually quite proud of how our folks reacted. New York is also a very big agricultural state, for example, and very shortly into the real challenging time of COVID, I had contact from the Department of Agriculture, in part because restaurants were closing, farmers were losing their markets. And they had all this produce. Where were they moving it to? Would Price Chopper support, some of that? And our produce team really, and all of our teams really reacted wonderfully to help move that produce into stores across our chain. We really operate regionally. So we were able to really max those opportunities. I think New York did a really good job. To your point of what you were saying earlier about New York, Phil, is that New York worked really, really hard on really ensuring supply chains, agriculture, et cetera, that there was a lot of cross-linking and a lot of opportunity to move food where we needed to move food. Because I think one of the key roles retailers played then, and I don't know if we've ever gotten as strong a presentation as we did during COVID, but was food security.
Yep.
Right. So that
Absolutely.
local supply chain is so important, that we were able to be very, very integral to that. I think was, really our teams were amazing. And considering everybody was also, so many of us had to do our work from home and or support in the stores. Right. And then agree, how do we look very hard at our local support supply chains and our local producers, and really work on investing in those relationships. So I think where you speak about, Allison, about flour being a problem, that was across the board. That was for our own brands, that was for our prepared foods, et cetera. That's another piece of the puzzle. And that was food data, how hard we worked on food data to make sure that we could keep information clean and clear and up to date. Those are two places I think our folks really invested and did a really good job.
So Ellie, one of the things that I love about you, and we know each other a long time, every time I do a report that you might not agree with, you send me an email. And you call me out, and I appreciate that. Let me say that. If you had to point to one thing that your senior management did during the pandemic, what would that be?
I think it would be how hard they work to protect our employees. I know that Scott Grimmett actually wrote or reached out to the governors of all of the states we operate in when we were all struggling with PPE. And, really just pivoting hard to ensure that our folks were safe and they felt safe. And then that same thought process, and comfort could be passed on to our shoppers. So I give them that every day of the week.
That's great. I would applaud, but I already applauded for Allison, and nobody liked me doing that. So Caroline, when I look at what you guys have done, obviously, different format, smaller stores. What was your key learning from the pandemic that going forward you're going to instill day in and day out in your operation as an RD in a way to educate shoppers?
Yeah, and I definitely agree with Allison when she said customer behavior. And I think the customer extends beyond, the people that come into our stores. It's also the people who are working for us, right? Our employees, our staff. We need to care for them as well. they are also now conscious shoppers, right? When it comes to budget, when it comes to voting with their dollars, when it comes to planning, a lot of people, even with restaurants opening up now, they're still cooking more. They're still building those skills. And as people are going back into the offices and going back to work, we need to be cognizant of providing resources and tools and recipes for our customers that are going to be very concise. So recipes that are 30 minutes or less, right? You want to make it quick, you want to do it and then go back to work or go back to caring for your children or kids, family, etc. The other piece that I think is another learning is our customers are choosing healthier foods. They are trying to be more proactive when it comes to taking care of their health. And health is a journey. It's not something that's overnight. I can take something and I'm all good tomorrow. I wish it was that way. It really isn't. So it is a journey. And with this increased awareness of health and wellness now, I think as dietitians, we really need to capitalize on it. We need to take advantage of the audience that we have and choosing how we want to disseminate and educate and provide these resources, educational resources to our customers so that they can better empower themselves, they can better care for themselves. And these are generations and generations and the legacy that we leave behind, which is something that my company is really, really strongly believes on when we have 66 years now that we've been doing this, of just providing nutrition education. That is one of our main goals as a company. So I would say those are probably the pieces that are key learnings from the pandemic.
Can I ask you a question? Oh, Phil, yeah. Can I ask just a question about that from Caroline? So one of the interesting things I think, Caroline, is that there's a lot of futurist and trend kind of followers who are trying to say, okay, what are the long-term impacts, right, out of the pandemic? So you talked about kind of cooking, that in the pandemic we saw, because people had to cook at home, right? And that all meals were at home, restaurants were an option. But as people go back to work, as kids go back to school and normal activities, as restaurants have opened now, do you see that trend, say a year from now or 2 years from now, will that kind of level of home cooking drop off again? Or do you see it kind of maintaining and continuing?
I see it as an opportunity for us to maintain it, honestly, because I think we've already started them on the skills, like what you said, Allison, with the flour and everything that ran out. Clearly, people were interested. Granted, they were stuck at home at the time. However, they've already started. It's like learning your ABCs, right? You start with the basics. You start with foundational health principles. How can we help them build upon these skills so that they can take it further later on and pass it down to their next generation and the next generation after that? That I think is the key part as health professionals when we have that impact and influence at our customers' point of purchase in our grocery retail locations.
And Allison and Ellie, do you guys see that trend continuing to the kind of cooking at home, that increase, or do you think it will diminish?
It's funny. I was just going to chime in and say that the optimist in me agrees with Caroline on let's capitalize on it, but the pessimist in me thinks it's a phase.
I agree. Allison, you were dead on. If you look at the new introductions that are coming out of CPG companies, right now, they're absurd. It's all about indulgence. We're seeing healthy cereals, and I'm not going to call out brands, even though I probably should. Healthy cereals now chocolate covered. And we're seeing ice cream that tastes like macaroni and cheese. I mean, that's what these CPG brands are promoting because, and I agree with Caroline that people have woken up. We've heard from Dr. Fauci and everybody else about building immunity and all these things that we should be doing. I don't see it happening. I still see people buying lots of potato chips, lots of crap in stores to make them feel good emotionally.
I totally agree. And I also agree, going back to Caroline's point on, we got more people's attention in the last year. And so how do we use that as motivation whether, you know, they never even thought about going to a healthy eating class, and hey, they came to one of our webinars, they listened to it for the first time. So we might shift people a little bit over to, oh, there's something interesting there. Oh, I can do that. So the way I'm kind of thinking of it is, and this kind of goes back to your question, Phil, is long-lasting trends. I think it's quick tidbits, it's quick classes, it's, hey, watch on demand. It's not you come to my time slot of like, that time doesn't work with my schedule. People are now like trying to squeeze things in when it fits for their schedule. They were just trying to take care of their kids and work from home, and they don't have time for this, but they are kind of interested. So how do we think as retail dietitians, like, let's pre-record our webinars. We're talking about that now, and put them up where they can watch them when they have time, instead of, hey, it's at noon, come if it, like, that doesn't work anymore. So shift that mentality to, we have your attention, but like, let's fit it into your schedule instead of you fitting into mine, I think is definitely long lasting. And maybe it's a 10-minute quick read that they can read on their own instead of a 30-minute grocery store tour that they don't have time for. So that quick convenience with regards to health and wellness, I think, is a long lasting.
So it's almost like the Netflix model.
100%. Yeah.
And what we need to do as retailers and as retail dietitians is have better AI to understand what people want, so that we can serve it up to them, so that they don't have to go through, you know, your whole catalog of recipes or webinars or whatever, but you know that I care about whatever I care about, and you're serving me up that video.
I think we'd be foolish if we went back to our old ways of what we did in retail dietetics before the pandemic. We can't, in my opinion, we can't just say, come to my grocery store tour at noon, come to my food demo. Like, I think that's a way of the past. And now it's here, pick and choose what you want, do it on your own time. Like, we're here to support you in a different way. But I personally, like, we're putting that to we're not even doing that anymore. And we don't plan to go back to that.
Ellie, what about you? What do you think, Elle?
I'm coming right down the middle between Allison and Caroline. And here's my take on it is, I do believe, I mean, we do know people are definitely more interested in health. And so many were pushed into cooking. You know, I don't know that we would ever have gotten so many people to cook. How much did we work to try to pull people back into cooking? You know, all of the years that I've been working as a dietitian, that has been a focus, right? So I think that's one of the, we'll never call this anything in this tragedy a silver lining, but it is something that we could not have created on our own. So now we do have a set of people that are more interested, more confident in cooking, and we have a set of people that are more interested in understanding how to protect their health, promote their health, etc. Not only that, but we absolutely have a public health effort that's really, really energizing nutrition and wellness. So I think we have a tailwind in that space that we could really merge and keep drawing people into. But I do agree with the model thought process that this is going to be cherry picked by every person, because each of their, you know, personalized nutrition, you know, that's where things are going anyway, but no one has ever felt more or less. Everyone's unique, I guess, is really the bottom line. And they believe that, and now they're looking at how they manage that, and then how they manage the unique needs of their family members, etc. So
Ellie, how do you deal with that? If you know, there's 5 of us here, we all have different needs, different desires. As an RD, how do you deal with that? What are the tools that you're going to need to satisfy my needs versus Caroline's needs?
But not just as an RD. I think it's as an RD working at retail, right? Because that's the, you know, piece of it.
So I'm going to go back to data and food data. One of the pieces of the puzzle that I've seen quite a lot in my role, I do a lot of support work for QA and own brands, and I have seen a lot of errors in food data. I mean, really shocking, like 25 to 40% of the items that are coming through, whether it's from the NFP update that was not done very well. A lot of items missing potassium that should have it, for example. And then the other part of food data is purchasing data and trends, et cetera. So really it's how do we combine the two? How do we make sure dietitians in particular, and particularly for things like prepared foods, you may have a real opportunity here to look at what is your food data and how can you move it through AI and through other business intelligence to make sure that you really are bringing to the table what shoppers are looking for. Maybe it is that combined indulgence. And
yeah. What's the most shocking thing that you found?
Oh, goodness. As a group, that many of the ingredient nutrition fact panels, it almost looked like they were just flipped, like a clerk flipped them without ensuring that the nutrient data was actually really evaluated again.
Wow.
We ran into a couple of those with a couple of trade partners who everyone just kept passing the ball, and everyone just kept assuming it was correct. And then we would get it, and we had terms embedded in ingredients that didn't belong there, and it was really just a kind of a, nobody looked that closely at it. And I'll try to think of an example before we're done of what really, but my bigger, what I laugh about is one of the things, because of flour, we had to keep redoing our recipes until all I could see in my dreams was this glazed pink donut, because I had to keep redoing the donuts and kind of thought I was in some kind of dietitian purgatory. Couldn't quite figure out what I did wrong. So, but really, it was really surprising to me. That I think that's very fundamental to where we're going with any of this.
So let me ask the three of you, is this a wake-up call? Has COVID-19 woken up retailers, health professionals, RDs, CPG companies, everybody to say we got to get our act together?
I think to some degree, yes. To answer your question earlier, Phil, you asked about how can we cater to multiple different people who have, individuality, right? And that's the key right now with personalized nutrition. I think the key with that truly is consumer change in behavior is also the way that they choose to, it's motivational piece, right? When it comes to food. When you think about, I think about nutritional sessions that we would have with our customers, there is an opportunity there for us to find what that root cause is. So what is the reason? Why are they going back to indulgences? Not to say that you can't have, I love indulgences. I love your occasional ice cream, chocolate, but that's great. But how do we get them to change their behavior? Is it stress that causes more, overwhelmed in their workplace or at home, or changes in environment, or finance is tight, right? And those pieces are where I feel we as educators can have an impact and influence on how we choose to recommend things and how we choose to suggest things to our customers, not only to build their health and well-being, but also, in terms of outside of the nutrition sense and diet sense, we talk about physical activity, we talk about brain health and mood supporting those pieces. We just came out of a really crazy pandemic year. It was really stressful. It was way beyond anything that we could have ever imagined. How are we caring for our customers and ourselves, right? We talk about self-care. How are we doing that? And how are we providing those tools and resources to help them support themselves in that way, shape, and form as well? So yeah, that's one of the ways that I can think of.
So Caroline, an interesting question for you is, I always think about all of us in our training as dietitians, right? And we were trained in a very fact-based kind of mindset. But something you said made me think about we don't often think about, and I don't think many dietitians are comfortable in the space of kind of emotion-based messaging, right? And, at the end of the day, we just want people to eat more fruits and vegetables. We don't have to sell it because they have vitamin C or, fiber or those kinds of things. But can you talk about, are you guys doing work more on emotion-based messaging or more on that story arc of just with the end goal in mind, but less about, you need this, you need low sat fat, you need monos, polys, omega-3s for heart disease. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think, it's really easy to provide direction. It's really easy to provide recommendations and suggestions, right? Like you said, Annette, everybody eat more veggies. That's the goal. If we can get people to eat more veggies, that would be so great. That would be so awesome. I think, mission accomplished. But how do we get them to get to that point? If they've never had a broccoli their entire life, how do you even get them started, right? What is that thing inside of them that, that little voice inside their head that's telling them, oh, that's not a good idea, or, that tastes not so great, or even though it's healthy, I don't really care for it. Definitely, I feel food it has a lot of emotion tied to it, right? We talk about comfort eating, we talk about emotional eating. That is all emotion tied to food. And I think we have the opportunity to involve our customers with that goal setting process. So, in our coaching sessions at Natural Grocers, we train our nutritionists to ask the question of, are you willing to make this change? Are you willing to eat XYZ, vegetables? Are you willing to drink more water? How much, how often? Making those SMART goals, I think, are key to being able to see even little success every step of the way. Like I said, health is a journey. If we see, I remember seeing my customers making just little success, and they would come back and say, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. Or, I'm seeing results. That is the satisfaction that we get as retail dietitians, is seeing the progress that our customers make throughout the years, throughout the months, throughout the days. And that is a very rewarding and fulfilling thing, in my opinion. That is the reason why I'm still in this grocery retail world.
So, Allison, let me put you on the spot. Your global CEO has come out in a very strong way on health, saying that, for all your brands across the globe, health is important, is number one. So my putting you on the spot is, how has that changed what you do day in and day out? Has it changed it, or is it just a great, PR play?
I mean, he does really care about health. It's a personal passion, but it is trickled down to the brands. And so basically, we made a commitment that says that 55% of our private brand products have to be healthy by X year. And so basically that leads to a massive project to reformulate thousands and thousands and thousands of products to remove artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, whatever. So there is dirty work happening on the ground, absolutely. And then there is a lot of it is the messaging and how we're talking to our customers. And that's where our program comes in, right? And that's why we're so strategically prioritized right now is, I think the way I think of it is, I have 3 dietitians and we have 400 plus stores. So how do I focus on getting health messaging out, personalized health with 3 dietitians and 400 stores? I struggle with that every day. So first step is we just kind of rebranded, and our messaging, it used to be, come talk to nutrition partners, dietitians. And now it's, we're your personalized dietitians. As silly as that is, we added the word personalized in italics, and it's like hitting for people. They're like, oh my gosh, I have my own needs. Like, I have a kid with allergies. I have a kid with this. You can help me on my personal needs, like boom, like, so little things like that. And that was a big marketing campaign, but we're now like, that's step one. And then another thing we think about all the time with personalized health is we frankly, with 3 dietitians and 400 stores, cannot go and meet with every customer. So we work really closely with our consumer insights team and are getting data from them, which we just did a massive survey, customer survey, and we're blown away by what our customers ranked with health priorities. Gut health was number 1, which blew me away. I would have put plant-based ahead of that. I would have put protein ahead of that, keto, everything. Gut health was number 1, like by far. So work with consumer insights, see what your customers want and your store's version of health. And obviously that's how we're working on personalized, because we can't go to the minute level of every single customer. So Phil, strategically thinking about health and our CEO or whoever's ambitions, that's why our program exists, number 1. And then I think it's really getting down to the customer level, and what our customers want is how we're going to end up making a broad impact. So in order to do that, one of our dietitians a couple of weeks ago said to me, she's working on programming, and she's like, I don't even know if I know what our customer wants when I'm planning all these classes, like, should I be planning these classes? Is that what they want to see? So I think ask your customers what they want, whether you conduct a Survey Monkey or you get consumer insights to do it, and start there would be, I think, a helpful exercise. It was for us, at least.
And you should also hire more retail dietitians.
I know, if only, right?
You know?
I would say another, going back to the COVID conversation, we launched fully virtual, right? So we're unique compared to most other retailers, but we're staying like that for a reason. And there's a debate, pros and cons to both models, but we did a quick little analysis to say, hey, I have 3 dietitians. I could either cover 3 zip codes, or I could cover 150 zip codes by meeting with these customers virtually. We have to sacrifice the in-person model of not holding their hands throughout the store, which is a big sacrifice. But in turn, our reach is a lot more broad with this model that we're going to continue using for the short term. So
it's an interesting question, Allison, and I wonder, and I'm curious, Caroline, if your nutritionists are back in store, doing more in store again, but will the individual crave that personal touch again, right? Like the more in-person kind of engagement, and as people
some will, I think, absolutely.
Yeah.
Some will, yeah.
I agree with Allison. Some will, for sure. I think we'll definitely maintain the virtual model because people are still, they love it. And I agree with you, Allison, in terms of covering a wider net, right? Casting that wider net, that also helps our retailers in terms of brand awareness and everything, because we represent them.
So there's a question when it comes to kind of that virtual personal touch of, will we see retail dietitian programs going to the point where shoppers can text you or text one of your dietitians with a question or for advice on something? Like, how far does that model go? Because I think there's I think that's one line of the question, but also there's this piece of, okay, are we going to get cook along kind of exhaustion, and then what's the next iteration of that?
So
I think
I'm going to offer.
Go ahead, Ellie.
I'm sorry. So I'm going to offer a yes to that, but I'm not sure quite exactly what it would look like. And I'm not sure I would have offered that, except my son is on his way to college, graduated in June, on his way to college. And right now he can text anybody at his college in the different offices. He's texting with them to get all of his answers on orientation and his classes and things along that line. And they started it in the spring. So I was pretty impressed with that kind of connection, that he can, I have a question about this. And he texts the guy, his guidance counselor, and they text him back. So it's been, to me, that's very interesting. And as we think about personalized, I think that that's the kind of service that will differentiate over time. How you manage it, though, and whether it's an on-call person or the logistics of it are going to be interesting to see. Right, a lot of places use things like Zendesks.
Yeah,
I'm not sure we have that opportunity with nutrition.
So Ellie, first of all, congratulations. How are you dealing with separation anxiety here?
Well, because he's the real separation is trying to figure out what kind of vehicle we can get him into. He's commuting to start with.
Okay.
But either way, we've all been home, right? I mean, his senior year was home and mostly home. Yeah, but he was part-time in school. So
bottom line is, if he was home for a year, it's either a Porsche or a Ferrari. Come on.
I really wanted to put him in my old Durango, but that's not going to work.
Allison or Caroline, any thoughts on kind of that movement of maintaining virtual but keeping virtual fresh, and what's the next iteration of virtual health and wellness services?
Yeah, I think maintaining, the coaching sessions as well as classes virtually. Currently, we already have an established, I would say, system in terms of, we have a nutrition education department at our store support center, home office, and corporate. And we have the ability for customers, if they go on our website, there's a little button that says ask a health coach. So they can literally put in a question, and there's like a contact us form, right? But they can put in their health and wellness question, and we have someone that will provide an answer and resources to their questions. So I think it's kind of heading towards that texting side, Annette, but I'm not quite sure if we have gotten to that point yet, but maybe in the future, who knows?
I think if the pandemic told us anything, nothing is out of the question.
Yeah, that's really it.
Like I went through a pregnancy during COVID, and our appointments turned to, hey, we're going to mail you a scale and we're going to mail you a blood pressure monitoring system. And you're going to do it all at home. And that's the future. Like nothing is out of the question. I think absolutely we'll be texting. People will be texting. I think absolutely there's going to be the chat bot features like ShopRite has to chat the dietitian. Like we're looking into that, because why not? Like if someone could be shopping online and, hey, let me ask that dietitian which yogurt I should choose. Nothing is out of the question, I think, is my takeaway. We would have laughed if we would have said, 2 years ago, you're all going to stay at home for a year. So I think let's just think outside of the box and something like bend the norm. And that's where I think when I said earlier, like, I hope we don't go back to the way we did it before, because if anything, this taught us to do something bigger, like just ask or try and try texting the dietitians. And if it becomes too much or privacy issues or whatever, stop doing it. But
I'd like to go back to private label for a moment, because, I think all three of you are involved in that. When I go into an Aldi, or if I go into Panera Bread, there's a list of over 100 different ingredients that they will not use in their private label in the case of Aldi. And I know, Allison, you and Ellie have been very involved in store brands. Is that going to be the rule of thumb? I just saw a report that came out, I think it was last week or the week before, that suggests that within the next 10 years, 50% of all products that are in a grocery store are going to be store brands and will have very discrete, very distinctive characteristics to them. Am I going to walk into my local Stop and Shop and see a list of 100 ingredients?
Oh my gosh, yeah. That's your advantage as a private label. You can control what you put in your products. You can't control what the national brands put in their products. So for us, it's an advantage. Like, it's how do we strategically use our private label as absolutely. We have a list of ingredients, and it's getting bigger and bigger by the day. There's so many ingredients. I'm sure Ellie sees this every day, where how are those still allowed in our products? Like, look at Europe. We are years and years and years. Red 40, I mean, those have all been banned for years in Europe. So I think absolutely. I think of it as your niche. Like, our brands are our hero brands, and we talk to customers like that because we want to make them this thing that are better than the national brands, because we choose them, we make them, we develop them. So, and transparency, labeling transparency is the next norm. So I think, yes, 1,000%, the free from lists are going to be integral to strategy. And I'm sure, Ellie, I don't know if you see the same, but
how do we communicate that to consumers? I mean, we talk about personalized nutrition. We have these DNA tests. The problem with the DNA tests is you get back a 100-page report that, most people don't go through, of what they should be eating, what they shouldn't be eating. How do we communicate this properly? Ellie?
So I'm going to get back to data, right? So our food data, those free from, I think one of our real challenges is that there are ingredients that we have to be authentic about it, that we have to ensure that how we label and what we label has meaning to the item, which is something that I think has gotten a little bit lost, but also that we allow science to be part of the future, look at where information on things like MSG is going. So MSG definitely, something that we should be looking at for improving flavor profiles and lowering sodium. But we still have a little bit of a 1968, bad rap halo going there that we have to overcome. But I do think data is going to be the key, Phil. I mean, there's, as to your point, if you have 4 dietitians and 400 stores, and people are looking for, the individual things that are going to serve their individual health, then data and ensuring that we can present data in a way that truly is helpful and protective and supportive is going to be a very big part of where we can go as a profession and as a value add for our retailers.
Yeah. I want to make sure we're being conscious of time, and we thank you guys so much for being here. I want to do one last round of questions. So if you had to indicate to your retail dietitian colleagues one thing they should be doing to kind of prepare for the future and the long-term trends coming out of COVID, what would those be? Caroline, why don't you start?
Yeah, I think, we talk a lot about consumer behavior today, supplier chains, diversity, all the different things in between. But ultimately, our business in grocery retail, our customer is king. So customer service, in my opinion, is going to be a huge differentiator. We want to work on building that rapport, building that trust, creating that relationship beyond the immediate transaction that will be most rewarding for us. So whether it's paying attention to, what we're offering to our customers on a regular basis with deals and sale items and other things that we're providing to them, but also that personalization piece, which we talk about, and having these our corporate values and our mission align with our customers as well. That's going to be also key because we play such a pivotal position in the food chain, and this system is essential to our health and well-being. So yeah, that would be my number one advice, I would say, to focus on is customer service.
Good point. Allison?
Kind of along the same lines, I would just try to get to know your customer on a broader level. So get with consumer insights, look at loyalty data. We could hypothesize, but there's data out there with your retailers. So just dig into that a little bit as you set your strategy would be mine.
Good. Ellie?
So yeah, I have to say, definitely those things. The word value, right? I mean, value is and confidence. I think shoppers also want confidence that the choices they're making are going to do for them what they wanted them to do. So that I think is a real opportunity for retail RDs to make sure that they support that process in all the communication, service, and value channels that they can get to.
And Annette, if I could just add one more thing. I know we're almost out of time, but from all three of you, one or two words, what's keeping you up at night as it relates to health and wellness and retail? Ellie, why don't you go first? One or two words, that's it.
I'm really not good at that, but I would say security, food security and nutrition together.
Caroline?
I would say immunity for mine. Yeah.
And Allison?
Probably personalization.
Good.
And that's it.
Yeah. Thanks, you guys, for joining us. This has been a great discussion. Appreciate your time today.
Yeah, you guys are doing a great job. Appreciate it. Appreciate you sharing your insights with all the RDBA members. And again, to be repetitive, Allison, congratulations on being the RDBA RD of the Year for 2021. Thank you. It was
a big surprise. Appreciate it, as always.
Okay.
Good. Have a good afternoon, you guys.
So great to hear from everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.